War Machine, released on Netflix on March 6, 2026, is a military science fiction action film directed by Patrick Hughes, the Australian filmmaker best known for The Expendables 3 and The Hitman's Bodyguard. Starring Alan Ritchson in the lead role, the film blends two very distinct genres, the gritty realism of military training drama and the explosive, survival-driven chaos of a science fiction alien thriller. What begins as a story about grief, duty, and perseverance transforms, roughly a third of the way through, into a full-blown extraterrestrial encounter, one that forces a squad of raw recruits to confront a threat no military training could have prepared them for. The film's central premise is deceptively simple: a group of soldiers on their final training exercise for entry into the elite United States Army Ranger Regiment find themselves hunted by a vastly superior alien war machine. They have no real weapons, no communications, and no backup. All they have is each other, their training, and the stubborn will of one grief-stricken man to survive. Act 1, Grief, War, and a Brother's Promise. The film opens in Afghanistan, where an unnamed staff sergeant, played by Ritchson, arrives to assist his brother's broken-down convoy. The two brothers share a moment of connection and ambition. The younger brother expresses a dream of joining the Army Rangers, something he wants both of them to pursue. It is a moment of warmth and hope set against the backdrop of a brutal war. That hope is immediately shattered. Taliban insurgents attack the convoy, killing everyone except the staff sergeant, who suffers a severe knee injury. Despite his wounds, he attempts to carry his mortally wounded brother back to base. He collapses before making it. When he wakes in hospital, he learns his brother has died. In a bitter irony, rather than receiving comfort, he is awarded the Silver Star, a medal of valor that, in his mind, represents not heroism but failure. He did not save his brother. The medal becomes a symbol of his guilt. This trauma is the engine that drives the entire narrative. The sergeant is not on a mission for personal glory or professional ambition. He is fulfilling a dead man's dream, driven by a sense of guilt that has curdled into an almost self-destructive determination. This emotional core gives the film unexpected weight for what might otherwise be a straightforward action movie. Act 2, Ranger Assessment and the Identity of 81. 2 years after the Afghanistan incident, the sergeant enrolls in RASP, the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, the brutal selection course for entry into the 75th Ranger Regiment, one of the most elite special operations forces in the United States military. At this point, he is stripped of his name and given a number, 81. In fact, all recruits are assigned numbers. 81 quickly distinguishes himself as the most physically capable recruit in the program. He leads every physical test and excels across the board. Yet despite his obvious capability, he refuses any leadership role. He keeps his fellow recruits at arm's length, refusing to form the bonds that military training is designed to cultivate. He is, in the language of the film, a lone wolf, grieving, haunted, and unable to let anyone close enough to matter. His mental state draws the attention of two commanding officers, Sergeant Major Sheridan, played with grizzled authority by Dennis Quaid, and First Sergeant Torres, played by Isai Morales. Both men recognize something broken in 81, not a physical weakness, but a psychological one. During an underwater training exercise, 81 nearly drowns without showing any apparent instinct for self-preservation. This is a red flag. Sheridan and Torres pull him aside and strongly suggest he step back from the program to seek mental health support. 81 refuses. He will not stop. He cannot stop. Stopping would mean accepting that his brother's dream dies with him. The commanding officers ultimately relent. They allow 81 to advance, and, in a decision that speaks to their belief in his raw capability, they assign him as team leader for the program's final exercise. The exercise is a simulated mission: enter a forested wilderness, locate and destroy a classified downed aircraft, and rescue its supposed pilot. It is designed to be the final test of everything the recruits have learned. Unknown to anyone, it will become something far more terrifying. Before the exercise begins, there are faint reports in the news of an asteroid passing close to Earth and breaking apart. Nobody pays it much attention. But during the training exercise deep in the wilderness, 81 and his squad are struck by an enormous blast from the sky. Communications go down. Compasses behave strangely. The team is isolated. They discover a strange object near a creek, which they initially believe is the classified aircraft they are meant to destroy. They detonate it with explosives. The object is completely unharmed. And then it transforms. What rises from that impact site is not a crashed plane. It is a walking, alien war machine, an enormous, heavily armored robot of extraterrestrial origin, capable of firing laser beams, deploying explosive projectiles, and hunting human beings with terrifying precision. The recruits, armed only with blank rounds for the training exercise, cannot fight back. They can only run. This pivot, from military drama to science fiction survival horror, is the film's boldest narrative move. Director Patrick Hughes has stated in interviews that he consciously chose to film the alien machine sequences like a horror movie, using the creature's size, its near invulnerability, and the confined wilderness terrain to generate maximum dread. The machine is not just a physical threat. It is a psychological one. It disrupts every tool and skill the recruits have trained to rely upon. Their compasses malfunction near it. Their weapons are useless. Their communication equipment is dead. Everything the military gave them is suddenly worthless. Recruits begin to die, graphically, brutally, one by one. The machine does not negotiate. It does not pause. It pursues them across rivers, through forests, over terrain that should favor the humans but consistently proves to favor the machine. By the time the squad reaches the cadre, instructors who were supposed to be playing the enemy in the training exercise, they find those soldiers already dead, eliminated by the machine before the recruits arrived. As the group is whittled down by the relentless pursuit, only a handful survive, 81, and a soldier known as 7, played by Stephen James. During a moment of desperate rest and reflection, 7 reveals something unexpected: he knew 81's brother. This connection between the two surviving soldiers carries emotional resonance. It is a reminder that 81's quest is not just personal. His brother touched lives beyond his own. That knowledge does not erase 81's grief, but it shifts something in him. The survivors attempt to escape in an M1117 armored security vehicle, loading it with live ammunition, assault rifles, machine guns, from the training cache. They discover, to their horror, that even live rounds cannot penetrate the machine's armor. Conventional military firepower is completely useless against it. The ASV is eventually destroyed, leaving 81 and 7 as the only ones still alive. 81, however, has been watching the machine, observing it. And he notices something the machine's designers may not have anticipated: it has a ventilation system. A method of expelling heat. A weakness. In the film's climax, 81 does something brilliantly low-tech. He lures the machine toward a construction site and pours small rocks into its ventilation system. The machine, unable to regulate its own temperature, overheats. And then it explodes. The solution is not a high-tech weapon or a military airstrike. It is sand and gravel fed into a vent. It is the kind of solution that only a person who truly studied the threat, rather than simply running from it, could devise. In this sense, the climax rewards 81's quiet, observational nature. His refusal to simply panic and flee, his tendency to analyze even in moments of crisis, is what saves his life and, ultimately, the lives of others. The final revelation: a global war has begun. 81 and 7 make it back to base, only to find it destroyed. Sheridan and Torres, miraculously still alive, reveal the devastating truth: the suspected asteroid was not a single object. It was a coordinated arrival of an entire army of alien machines. They have not landed in one isolated wilderness training ground. They have landed across the world. A global war with an extraterrestrial enemy has already begun. This revelation reframes the entire film. What felt like a localized horror survival story is revealed to be the opening chapter of something far larger. The alien machines are not a random accident. They are an invasion force. When 81 reports what he discovered, the ventilation weakness, it is treated not as a minor observation but as a potential turning point in the war. It is the one vulnerability that humanity has found in an otherwise unstoppable enemy. Based on this discovery, 81 is formally accepted into the 75th Ranger Regiment and assigned to lead the next assault against the machines. The cycle is complete. He entered training to fulfill his brother's dream. He exits it having discovered something that could save humanity. The grief that nearly destroyed him became, in an unexpected way, the engine of survival for the entire planet. Themes and significance. War Machine operates on several thematic layers. On the surface, it is a straightforward military sci-fi survival film drawing obvious inspiration from the Predator franchise, Full Metal Jacket's training sequences, and elements of Aliens. But beneath that familiar genre scaffolding, it tells a genuinely affecting story about grief and purpose. 81 is a man who does not want to survive for his own sake. He wants to survive because stopping would dishonor the brother he could not save. His drowning during training is not an accident, it is a moment where his body reveals what his mind refuses to admit: he is not entirely sure he wants to live. The alien threat paradoxically gives him a reason to live that transcends personal guilt. When he discovers the ventilation weakness, he is no longer just honoring a dead brother. He has become genuinely necessary. He has a mission that belongs to him, not a ghost. Filmed across Victoria and Queenstown, New Zealand, with an estimated budget of $80 million, War Machine was originally intended for theatrical release. Strong streaming demand led to its Netflix acquisition. It premiered in Australia on February 12, 2026, and globally on Netflix on March 6, 2026. Critics received it warmly as a fun, old-school throwback action film. Alan Ritchson has already expressed enthusiasm for a sequel, referring to a potential follow-up as War Machines, and director Patrick Hughes has confirmed a larger story arc is already mapped out, should sequels be greenlit. The film's ending, in which the world is revealed to be under simultaneous alien attack, is clearly designed as a franchise-launching moment. 81's knowledge of the machine's weakness sets up his role not just as a ranger, but as humanity's most valuable soldier in a war that has only just begun. When a film lands on Netflix rated R, clocking in at 1 hour and 46 minutes, and earns the descriptors violent, exciting, suspenseful, and fan favorite all at once, it is telling you something important about its identity. War Machine is not trying to be art house cinema. It is not reaching for award season prestige. It knows exactly what it is: a lean, hard-hitting, adrenaline-soaked military science fiction thriller, and it executes that identity with remarkable confidence and precision. Every element of the film, from its carefully managed runtime to its deliberate tonal choices, reflects a clear creative vision: deliver maximum entertainment impact without overstaying the welcome. Understanding War Machine through the lens of its runtime, its rating, its genre classification, and its reception on Netflix reveals not just what kind of movie it is, but why it works as well as it does for the audience it targets. These are not mere marketing labels. They are the architecture of the film's entire design philosophy. 106 minutes. That is what director Patrick Hughes and his team determined was the right length for War Machine, and that decision alone says a great deal about the film's philosophy. In an era where blockbuster runtimes routinely bloat past 2.5 hours, sometimes approaching 3, War Machine makes a fundamentally different bet. It bets on efficiency. The film's structure is divided into 3 distinct acts, each roughly occupying a third of that runtime. The first act, set in Afghanistan and then in the brutal world of Ranger Assessment and Selection Program training, uses approximately 30 to 35 minutes to establish character, motivation, and emotional stakes. The second act introduces the alien threat and transitions the film from military drama into science fiction survival horror, lasting another 30 or so minutes. The third and final act is all pursuit, ingenuity, and resolution, bringing everything home in a tight and satisfying climax. This structure works precisely because the runtime enforces discipline. There is no space for unnecessary subplots, no room for characters who do not serve the story, no indulgent action sequences that go on longer than they need to. Every scene has a job. Every moment either builds character, advances plot, or escalates tension. The result is a film that feels almost kinetic. A viewer barely has time to breathe before the next development arrives. Consider what this runtime means for pacing. At 1 hour and 46 minutes, War Machine never allows its audience to grow comfortable. The Afghanistan prologue is emotionally devastating and over quickly. The training sequences are brutal and efficiently rendered. The shift to alien survival horror arrives right when the training narrative has done its job. And from the moment the machine rises from that impact crater, the film does not slow down. It does not pause for lengthy exposition dumps or reflective conversations that interrupt the momentum. Information is delivered on the run, literally and figuratively. This is a deliberate artistic choice rooted in a clear understanding of genre. Military action films and science fiction survival thrillers live and die by momentum. Once the threat is introduced, the audience must feel that danger is constant, that survival is never guaranteed, that the characters, and by extension the viewer, cannot afford to relax. A longer runtime would undermine this effect. Every additional 10 minutes of runtime is 10 more minutes in which tension could dissipate, in which the audience could detach emotionally and critically assess rather than feel. Patrick Hughes, whose previous work includes The Expendables 3 and The Hitman's Bodyguard, brings significant experience to the problem of action pacing. He understands that the best action films feel shorter than they are, not because they are boring or forgettable, but because they sustain engagement so thoroughly that time collapses. War Machine, at 1 hour and 46 minutes, achieves exactly this. Viewers who have watched it frequently report being surprised when the credits roll, not because the film felt incomplete but because they were so thoroughly inside it that time vanished. There is also a practical wisdom to this runtime for a Netflix release specifically. Streaming audiences behave differently from theatrical audiences. They are more likely to pause, more prone to distraction, more likely to abandon a film if it loses them in the middle. A tight, punchy runtime reduces the risk of abandonment dramatically. War Machine's 1 hour and 46 minutes fits comfortably in an evening viewing session, begins with enough urgency to hook a viewer in the first 10 minutes, and never provides a natural stopping point because it never truly slows down. War Machine carries an R rating, and it earns that rating honestly. The film is graphic in its depictions of combat, injury, death, and the physical cost of both conventional warfare and extraterrestrial assault. This is not violence for shock value alone. The R rating serves the film's thematic and emotional architecture in ways that a PG-13 version simply could not. The opening Afghanistan sequence establishes the tone immediately. When the Taliban attack strikes 81's brother's convoy, the aftermath is not sanitized. Bodies are shown. Wounds are real. The sergeant's desperate crawl to save his dying brother is rendered with raw, unglamorous physicality. This violence is not exciting, it is horrifying, grief-inducing, morally heavy. It sets up the emotional foundation of the entire film. If that opening violence were softened into PG-13 territory, the psychological impact on the audience, the understanding of why 81 is broken, why guilt has become his primary operating mode, would be diminished. The Ranger training sequences carry their own kind of physical brutality. The program depicted in the film is grueling, relentless, and deeply physical. Recruits are pushed past their limits repeatedly. The underwater drowning sequence involving 81 is particularly intense, a moment where the boundary between training accident and deliberate self-sabotage is deliberately blurred. An R rating allows Hughes to film this moment with unsparing honesty, forcing the audience to genuinely question whether 81 wants to survive. But it is the alien machine sequences that most thoroughly justify the R rating. When the machine begins hunting the recruits, the deaths are not the clean, bloodless eliminations of a family-friendly action film. They are violent, sudden, and graphic. Limbs are lost. Bodies are charred. Blood is present throughout. The camera lingers on the aftermath in ways that a PG-13 cut would have been forced to avert its gaze from. Hughes has spoken about deliberately filming these sequences like a horror movie, and the R rating is what allows the horror register to function fully. This is crucial to the film's suspense mechanics. The reason War Machine is described as genuinely suspenseful rather than merely exciting is that the audience genuinely believes characters can die at any moment, and that their deaths will be awful. That belief requires the film to demonstrate, early and repeatedly, that it is not going to protect its characters. Nobody is safe. And the deaths that follow deliver on that contract with brutal consistency. These are adult themes that deserve adult treatment. Softening the violence would soften the emotional stakes alongside it. The fact that 81 carries his brother's corpse through an Afghan landscape, that he is surrounded by bodies while receiving a silver star he believes he does not deserve, that he nearly allows himself to drown during training, these are not moments compatible with a family-friendly rating. The R rating allows the film to honor the weight of what its protagonist is carrying. War Machine occupies a fascinating and somewhat rare generic space. It is simultaneously a military drama, a science fiction thriller, and an action-adventure film. These genres do not always sit comfortably together, and the film has attracted criticism for exactly this reason. some viewers feel the transition between the military drama of its first act and the science fiction of its second and third acts is jarring, even incoherent. But for the large portion of its audience that has embraced the film enthusiastically, this genre blend is precisely the source of its appeal. The military genre component is the most grounded and emotionally substantive. The Ranger assessment and selection program sequences draw on real training protocols and culture. Recruits are stripped of their names and given numbers. They are subjected to relentless physical and psychological stress. Drill instructors, in this case Sergeant Major Sheridan and First Sergeant Torres, function simultaneously as antagonists and mentors, the classic archetype of military training drama refined through films like Full Metal Jacket and An Officer and a Gentleman. The depiction of PTSD and its interaction with training culture adds genuine dramatic texture that elevates these sequences beyond simple action spectacle. The science fiction component arrives without apology or extensive setup, which is a bold structural choice. The alien machine is not explained in great scientific detail. Its origins are suggested rather than elaborated upon. The asteroid reports that appear on news broadcasts in the background serve as the only advance warning of what is coming. When it reveals itself, the film asks the audience to accept it completely and immediately, and shifts into pure science fiction survival mode. This approach trusts the audience to make the genre leap alongside the characters, who have no choice but to accept what is standing in front of them. The action-adventure element is what threads the military and science fiction components together. The film is, structurally, an adventure story, a group of people with limited resources facing an overwhelming threat, using ingenuity and teamwork to survive against impossible odds. The wilderness setting, the improvised solutions, the physical demands placed on the characters, these are classic adventure story elements that transcend any specific genre and speak to something primal in storytelling. Audiences respond to survival narratives because they tap into fundamental questions about human endurance, creativity under pressure, and the will to live. The combination of these three genres creates a film that delivers multiple types of satisfaction simultaneously. Viewers who came for military action get it in abundance. Viewers who enjoy science fiction creature features get a genuinely threatening, well-designed alien antagonist. And viewers who simply want a gripping adventure story get one of the most propulsive survival narratives that Netflix has released in recent years. War Machine became a significant Netflix hit following its March 6, 2026 release. The fan favorite designation is not simply a marketing claim, it reflects genuine, organic audience enthusiasm that spread rapidly through the platform and across social media in the weeks following release. Understanding why requires examining what Netflix audiences actually want. The streaming landscape is crowded with content competing for attention every single evening. Films that rise above that noise and become genuinely talked about tend to share certain characteristics. They are emotionally accessible, they deliver on their genre promises without excessive self-consciousness, they feature at least one compelling central performance, and they provide the kind of entertainment that makes people want to tell their friends about it. War Machine delivers on all four counts. Alan Ritchson, already beloved by audiences for his role as Reacher in the Amazon Prime series, brings exactly the physical presence and understated emotional depth that the role demands. His 81 is a man of few words but enormous presence, someone the audience can root for without needing lengthy speeches to explain why. Ritchson performed many of his own stunts throughout the production, including a demanding underwater sequence requiring extended breath holds. That commitment to physical authenticity translates on screen in ways that audiences register instinctively, even if they cannot articulate precisely why. The film is also, crucially, fun. Despite its R rating, despite its genuine emotional weight, despite the darkness of its subject matter, War Machine delivers the specific pleasure of watching competent people in extreme situations use every available resource to survive. When 81 pours gravel into the alien machine's ventilation system and watches it overheat and explode, the audience experiences a surge of satisfaction that is almost primal. The solution is so simple, so human, so clever, and it rewards viewers who are paying attention. The violent, exciting, and suspenseful descriptors attached to the film by audiences reflect three different but equally valid responses to the same experience. Those who describe it as violent are acknowledging its unflinching commitment to the real cost of what the characters go through. Those who call it exciting are responding to its pacing and action choreography. Those who find it suspenseful are responding to the genuinely effective horror mechanics that Patrick Hughes imported from genre filmmaking: the darkness, the isolation, the sense that nothing is guaranteed. The fan favorite designation also speaks to rewatchability. War Machine, at 1 hour and 46 minutes, is precisely the length that invites a second viewing. It is easy to fit into a schedule. Its action sequences reward repeat attention. And for viewers who enjoyed it, recommending it to friends and watching their reactions becomes part of the film's social life, extending its reach well beyond its opening weekend viewership. War Machine's runtime, rating, genre, and fan reception form a coherent, interlocking picture of a film that has identified its purpose with unusual clarity and executed it with considerable skill. 106 minutes ensures momentum never falters. The R rating ensures emotional and narrative authenticity. The genre blend of military drama, science fiction, and action-adventure ensures multiple avenues of audience engagement. And the fan-favorite status on Netflix reflects the rare achievement of a streaming action film that not only meets audience expectations but exceeds them in ways that generate genuine word-of-mouth enthusiasm. In a streaming landscape flooded with content fighting for diminishing attention, War Machine succeeds because it understands a simple truth: a film that does exactly what it promises, at exactly the right length, with enough conviction and craft to make the audience forget they are watching a movie, will always find its audience. And that audience, once found, tends to be loyal. Sonnet 4.6 Claude. The film begins deep inside the brutal world of U.S. Army Ranger training, where only the strongest soldiers survive. The atmosphere is harsh from the very first moment. Endless forests stretch across isolated mountains, rain pours constantly, and every soldier is physically and mentally exhausted. These men are not ordinary recruits. They are elite soldiers trying to complete one of the hardest military programs in the world. Every step they take is designed to break them. Sleep deprivation, freezing temperatures, hunger, and non-stop drills have already pushed many candidates to quit. But for the remaining soldiers, one final mission stands between them and graduation. At the center of the story is a combat engineer, a soldier trained not only to fight but also to solve deadly battlefield problems. He knows how to build defenses, clear explosives, and keep his team alive in impossible situations. Unlike the others, he is not driven by pride alone. He carries the pressure of responsibility. He understands that a leader's greatest burden is making sure his men survive. Throughout training he has already proven himself capable, but the final exercise will test him in ways no human being could ever imagine. The team is ordered to participate in one last grueling mission in a remote wilderness zone. The exercise is supposed to simulate a real combat operation behind enemy lines. Their instructors tell them the mission will combine survival tactics, reconnaissance, and extraction under extreme pressure. The soldiers believe this is simply another brutal training scenario. They are tired, injured, and mentally drained, but they continue forward because becoming a ranger means enduring pain beyond normal limits. As night falls, the team is dropped into a dark forest far away from civilization. The silence in the area feels unnatural. At first, the soldiers think exhaustion is affecting their minds. Strange noises echo through the trees. Electronic equipment begins malfunctioning. Radios produce static. GPS systems stop working completely. The instructors who are supposed to monitor the exercise suddenly disappear from communication channels. The team assumes it is part of the training, meant to confuse them and test their adaptability. But then the first horrifying incident occurs. One of the soldiers scouting ahead vanishes without warning. There is no scream, no gunfire, no sign of struggle. Only silence. The unit searches the area and discovers massive footprints pressed deep into the ground. The marks are unlike anything they have ever seen. Trees appear ripped apart by enormous force. Some soldiers think it could be an experimental military weapon. Others fear they may have crossed into enemy territory. The combat engineer studies the evidence carefully and realizes whatever made those tracks is far larger and stronger than any machine they know. Soon the team witnesses the impossible. A gigantic otherworldly killing machine emerges from the darkness. Towering above the trees, covered in armor-like metal, the creature moves with terrifying speed despite its enormous size. Its glowing mechanical eyes scan the environment like a predator hunting prey. The soldiers are frozen in shock because nothing in their military experience prepared them for this moment. It is neither human nor animal. It looks like advanced alien technology fused with unstoppable war machinery. The machine attacks instantly. Within seconds, heavily trained soldiers are slaughtered. Bullets bounce harmlessly off its armor. Explosions barely slow it down. The Rangers who once felt invincible suddenly realize they are completely outmatched. Their carefully practiced military tactics become useless against an enemy they cannot understand. Fear spreads rapidly through the group. Some soldiers panic. Others desperately try to fight back. The training mission immediately transforms into a desperate fight for survival. The combat engineer becomes the reluctant leader during the chaos. With commanding officers either dead or separated, the surviving soldiers turn to him for direction. Despite his fear, he forces himself to stay calm. He understands that panic will kill everyone faster than the machine itself. Drawing upon his engineering expertise, he begins analyzing the enemy's behavior. He notices patterns in its movement, energy bursts, and targeting systems. Unlike the others, he starts thinking strategically rather than emotionally. The film then shifts into a tense survival thriller. The forest becomes a deadly battlefield where the Rangers are constantly hunted. Every shadow feels dangerous. Every sound could mean death. The machine stalks them relentlessly, almost like it enjoys the hunt. It can track heat signatures, predict movement, and destroy entire sections of forest with devastating weapons. The soldiers are pushed beyond physical exhaustion. Some are wounded. Others begin losing hope entirely. One of the most powerful themes in this part of the story is the collapse of human certainty. These soldiers spent years training to become elite warriors. They believed discipline, weapons, and strategy could solve any problem. But now they face something far beyond human understanding. The film shows how quickly confidence disappears when people confront an enemy that completely changes the rules of war. The combat engineer refuses to surrender. He understands that direct combat is impossible, so he begins using the environment itself as a weapon. Drawing on his ranger training, he sets traps, creates diversions, and studies the machine's weaknesses. This becomes the heart of his character arc. Earlier in the film, he viewed his engineering skills as secondary compared to traditional combat abilities. As the soldiers move deeper into the wilderness, they discover terrifying evidence that the machine may not be alone. Burned landscapes, strange metallic debris, and abandoned military equipment suggest previous encounters were hidden from the public. The team realizes the government may have known something about this threat long before their mission began. This revelation creates anger and mistrust among the survivors. They feel abandoned, treated like expendable test subjects rather than soldiers. Tension also grows inside the group itself. Extreme fear begins exposing each soldier's true personality. Some become selfish and reckless. Others rise to the occasion with incredible bravery. Friendships are tested under unbearable pressure. One soldier sacrifices himself to save the others during an ambush, reminding the team what Ranger brotherhood truly means. Another loses control entirely after witnessing horrific deaths. These emotional breakdowns make the story feel human despite its science fiction premise. The killing machine itself becomes one of the film's most terrifying elements because it is not portrayed as mindless destruction. It behaves intelligently. It studies human tactics and adapts rapidly. Every failed attack teaches it something new. This creates constant suspense because the soldiers can never rely on the same strategy twice. The enemy evolves with every encounter, making survival increasingly difficult. The combat engineer eventually discovers that the machine uses a powerful energy core protected beneath layers of armor. Destroying it directly would require enormous firepower the team does not possess. However, he notices that the machine becomes temporarily vulnerable when releasing large energy blasts. This observation gives the soldiers a tiny chance of defeating it. But carrying out such a plan would require someone getting dangerously close to the creature. The middle section of the film focuses heavily on psychological endurance. The Rangers are no longer simply fighting an enemy. They are fighting exhaustion, hopelessness, and trauma. Sleep deprivation causes hallucinations. Constant fear destroys concentration. Every death weakens morale further. Yet the combat engineer keeps pushing forward because he knows leadership means continuing even when survival seems impossible. The environment also becomes increasingly hostile. Storms flood the terrain, communication remains impossible, and supplies run out. The soldiers are forced to rely entirely on instinct and training. The film emphasizes realism in how military units operate under pressure. Small tactical decisions, where to hide, when to move, how to conserve ammunition, become matters of life and death. Eventually, the team locates an abandoned underground military facility hidden beneath the forest. Inside, they uncover classified evidence revealing the horrifying truth. The Otherworldly machine is part of a secret encounter connected to extraterrestrial technology recovered years earlier. Scientists attempted to study the technology, but they lost control of it. The government buried the project to prevent public panic. The Ranger training exercise unknowingly took place near the containment zone. This revelation changes the entire tone of the story. The soldiers now understand they were thrown into a nightmare created by human arrogance. Military leaders believed they could control alien war technology, but instead unleashed something far beyond their understanding. The machine was not designed for peace or exploration. It was built solely for extermination. The combat engineer formulates a final plan inside the underground facility. Using explosives, fuel reserves, and the base's unstable power systems, he believes they can trap and destroy the machine permanently. But the plan requires extraordinary sacrifice. Someone must remain behind to manually trigger the detonation sequence after the others escape. The climax becomes an emotional and explosive battle between human determination and unstoppable technology. The remaining Rangers lure the machine into the underground structure through coordinated attacks and diversions. The fight is chaotic and terrifying. The machine tears through walls, fires devastating energy blasts, and kills more soldiers as the plan unfolds. Yet despite overwhelming odds, the Rangers continue fighting because they refuse to let their brothers die in vain. The combat engineer ultimately chooses to stay behind. His decision reflects the complete evolution of his character. At the beginning, he doubted his leadership abilities and viewed himself mainly as a technical specialist. By the end, he fully embraces the responsibility of protecting his unit no matter the cost. He understands true leadership is not about rank or glory. It is about sacrifice. As the survivors escape through collapsing tunnels, the engineer faces the giant killing machine alone in the facility's core chamber. The scene becomes deeply symbolic. One exhausted human soldier stands against a towering alien war machine designed purely for destruction. Despite fear and injuries, he refuses to back down. Using his knowledge of explosives and battlefield engineering, he triggers a chain reaction inside the unstable reactor systems. Massive explosions rip through the underground complex as the machine desperately tries to escape. The entire facility collapses in flames, burying the otherworldly weapon beneath tons of rock and debris. The surviving Rangers emerge from the forest at sunrise, traumatized but alive. Rescue teams finally arrive, yet the soldiers realize nobody will ever truly believe what happened. The government immediately seals the area and classifies the incident. Official reports describe the mission as a tragic training accident. The truth is hidden once again. The ending leaves audiences with a haunting feeling. Although the machine appears destroyed, subtle clues suggest the threat may not be completely gone. Strange signals continue appearing on damaged military equipment, and fragments of alien technology remain buried underground. This creates the terrifying possibility that humanity's encounter with the otherworldly war machine is only beginning. At its core, the story is not simply about monsters or science fiction action. The film explores what happens when elite soldiers face something beyond all human understanding. Training, discipline, and weapons alone are not enough. The combat engineer's journey represents the emotional heart of the film. He begins as a skilled but uncertain soldier and transforms into a true leader through unimaginable hardship. His intelligence, adaptability, and sacrifice become humanity's greatest weapons against an enemy built entirely for destruction. The giant killing machine symbolizes the terrifying consequences of uncontrolled warfare and technological arrogance. Unlike traditional movie monsters driven by instinct, this enemy reflects humanity's obsession with creating more powerful weapons without considering the consequences. The film warns that some forces should never be unleashed because once they escape control, survival itself becomes uncertain. By combining military realism, survival horror, emotional character development, and science fiction terror, The story creates an intense experience that feels both grounded and terrifyingly epic. The Rangers are pushed beyond human limits, forced to confront fear, death, and the unknown in a battle that transforms a training exercise into a nightmare of survival against an unstoppable otherworldly predator. The film opens in the harsh deserts and rocky mountains of Afghanistan, immediately placing the audience inside a tense military operation filled with danger and uncertainty. The atmosphere is heavy from the very first scene. Helicopters roar across the sky while armored convoys move carefully through narrow dirt roads surrounded by endless barren terrain. Dust fills the air constantly, making everything feel suffocating and unstable. The soldiers traveling through the region are exhausted from months of combat deployments, but they remain alert because every mission in the war zone could turn deadly within seconds. At the center of the story are two brothers serving together in the military. Their bond becomes the emotional foundation of the entire film. The older brother, played by Courtney, is confident, fearless, and deeply respected by the other soldiers in the unit. He carries himself like someone born for combat. Even in dangerous situations, he remains calm and protective toward his younger brother. The younger sibling, who later becomes the main hero of the story, admires him completely. To him, his older brother is more than family. He is a role model, protector, and symbol of strength. The film spends time showing their relationship before tragedy strikes. During quiet moments at the base, they joke with each other, share stories from home, and talk about life after deployment. These scenes are important because they create emotional depth and show how close they truly are. The older brother constantly pushes the younger one to become stronger, both mentally and physically. He tells him that fear is normal in war, but courage means moving forward despite it. One evening, while sitting outside their temporary barracks under the cold Afghan night sky, the older brother reveals a personal dream that he never had the chance to pursue. He confesses that he always wanted to become an Army Ranger. To him, Rangers represent the highest level of discipline, brotherhood, and sacrifice in the military. He talks passionately about the challenge of Ranger training and how earning that title would mean proving himself among the best soldiers in the world. The younger brother listens carefully, inspired by the determination in his brother's voice. However, the realities of war soon interrupt these dreams. The following morning, their unit is assigned a dangerous patrol mission through a remote mountainous region known for insurgent activity. Intelligence reports suggest enemy fighters may be operating nearby, but the mission appears routine at first. The soldiers load into armored vehicles while helicopters provide distant support overhead. Everyone remains cautious, but nobody expects the horror waiting for them. As the convoy moves deeper into the valley, the tension slowly builds. The roads become narrower, forcing the vehicles to travel in single file. Jagged cliffs rise on both sides, creating the perfect location for an ambush. The soldiers scan rooftops, hillsides, and windows for movement, knowing danger could appear from anywhere. Radio chatter becomes increasingly tense as suspicious signs begin appearing along the route. Then everything explodes into chaos. Without warning, a massive roadside bomb detonates beneath one of the lead vehicles. The explosion tears through the convoy with deafening force, flipping armored trucks and sending burning debris across the valley. Before the soldiers can react, gunfire erupts from hidden enemy positions high in the mountains. Bullets rain down from every direction. Smoke fills the air while terrified soldiers scramble for cover. The ambush scene is portrayed with brutal intensity. Communication breaks down almost immediately as panic spreads through the convoy. Some soldiers are wounded instantly. Others try desperately to return fire against enemies they can barely see. The younger brother experiences pure terror as the battlefield transforms into complete madness around him. Explosions echo across the cliffs while screams of injured soldiers blend with the sound of automatic gunfire. In the middle of the chaos, the older brother immediately takes control. Despite incoming fire, he begins organizing the soldiers and helping the wounded reach safety. His bravery becomes undeniable. He moves fearlessly through open ground to rescue trapped teammates while shouting orders over the noise of combat. Even during the ambush, his main concern remains protecting his younger brother. At one point during the firefight, the younger sibling freezes momentarily after witnessing another soldier killed beside him. The horror of war suddenly becomes real in a way training never prepared him for. Seeing his brother overwhelmed with fear, Courtney's character rushes toward him through heavy gunfire, pulling him behind cover and forcing him to focus. He reminds him that survival depends on staying mentally strong. The battle grows worse with every passing minute. Enemy fighters continue attacking from elevated positions while the convoy becomes trapped in the valley. Ammunition runs low, communication systems fail, and casualties increase rapidly. The older brother volunteers to lead a small team to flank the attackers and create an escape route for the remaining soldiers. Despite the obvious danger, he refuses to let his unit remain trapped. The younger brother begs him not to go, sensing the mission is almost suicidal. But the older sibling insists that protecting the others matters more than personal safety. Before leaving, he shares a final emotional moment with his brother. He tells him never to give up, no matter how dark life becomes. He reminds him again about his dream of becoming an army ranger and says that true warriors keep moving forward even after loss. These words later become the emotional core of the entire story. The flanking operation initially succeeds. The older brother and his team manage to push enemy fighters away from key positions, giving the convoy a chance to regroup. But just as hope begins returning, disaster strikes again. Hidden insurgents launch another attack from nearby ruins. During the intense exchange of gunfire, Courtney's character is critically wounded. The scene is devastating because it happens suddenly and realistically. One moment he is leading his men confidently, and the next he collapses after being hit multiple times. The younger brother watches helplessly from a distance before rushing toward him despite the danger. Gunfire continues erupting around them as he reaches his brother's side. What follows becomes one of the most emotional moments in the film. The older brother lies bleeding heavily in the dirt while chaos continues all around them. Despite his injuries, he tries to remain calm for his younger sibling. He tells him not to blame himself and urges him to survive no matter what happens. The younger brother desperately tries to stop the bleeding while calling for medical evacuation, but deep down he already knows the truth. The older brother dies in his arms before rescue can arrive. The battlefield suddenly feels silent despite the continuing gunfire. For the younger sibling, time itself seems to stop. Shock overwhelms him completely. The man who always protected him, guided him, and inspired him is suddenly gone forever. The emotional pain hits harder than the physical danger surrounding them. Eventually, after reinforcements arrive and the ambush ends, the surviving soldiers begin evacuating the dead and wounded. One of the film's most heartbreaking sequences shows the younger brother carrying his brother's lifeless body back toward the military base. Exhausted, covered in blood and dust, he struggles physically and emotionally with every step. This moment symbolizes far more than grief alone. As he carries the body through the desert landscape, the weight represents guilt, trauma, responsibility, and loss all at once. He replays the battle repeatedly in his mind, wondering if he could have saved him somehow. The image of his brother dying never leaves him. The audience can see the exact moment his psychological trauma truly begins. Back at the base, the emotional devastation continues. Soldiers who knew the older brother struggle to process his death because he was deeply respected by everyone around him. The younger sibling isolates himself completely. He barely speaks, avoids eye contact, and spends long periods staring blankly at walls or sitting alone in silence. The film carefully portrays the early stages of severe PTSD with realism and emotional depth. At night, he suffers horrifying nightmares about the ambush. He repeatedly dreams of explosions, gunfire, and his brother bleeding to death in his arms. Loud noises trigger panic attacks. Helicopter sounds cause flashbacks. Even simple moments, like seeing military gear or hearing combat radio chatter, send him spiraling mentally back into Afghanistan. One particularly powerful scene shows him waking up screaming in the middle of the night after reliving the ambush in a nightmare. Disoriented and terrified, he instinctively reaches for a weapon before realizing he is safe at the base. Other soldiers try to comfort him, but he pushes everyone away because he feels emotionally broken beyond repair. The trauma also fills him with survivor's guilt. He begins believing he should have died instead of his brother. In his mind, the wrong sibling survived the ambush. This guilt slowly consumes him, making it difficult for him to function normally. Military counselors encourage him to seek psychological help, but he refuses because part of him believes suffering is the only way to honor his brother's memory. After returning home from deployment, his emotional struggles worsen. Civilian life feels empty and disconnected compared to the battlefield. Crowded places make him anxious. Sudden movements cause instinctive reactions. Relationships with friends and family become strained because nobody fully understands what he experienced overseas. Yet through all the pain, one memory continues haunting him more than anything else: his brother's dream of becoming an Army Ranger. The idea begins as a simple thought, but eventually grows into an obsession. He remembers the passion in his brother's voice whenever he talked about Ranger training. Over time, he convinces himself that completing Ranger training is the only meaningful thing left he can do. It becomes more than a career choice. It becomes a tribute, a mission, and a way to keep his brother's spirit alive. Many people question his decision. Some believe he is emotionally unstable and using military service to escape grief rather than heal from it. Others warn him that Ranger training could worsen his PTSD because of its brutal physical and psychological demands. But none of this changes his mind. For him, becoming a Ranger is no longer about ambition. It is about purpose. The film then transitions into the next major chapter of his journey as he enters Army Ranger selection. From the beginning, the training pushes him beyond human limits. Endless runs, obstacle courses, combat drills, sleep deprivation, and survival exercises break many candidates mentally and physically. Instructors constantly pressure recruits, searching for any sign of weakness. For the hero, every challenge becomes tied to his brother's memory. Whenever exhaustion overwhelms him, he remembers carrying his brother's body through the Afghan desert. Whenever he feels like quitting, he remembers the dream his brother never got to fulfill. The trauma that once nearly destroyed him slowly transforms into fuel pushing him forward. However, PTSD does not disappear simply because he entered training. Throughout Ranger School, he continues battling internal demons. Flashbacks occur during live-fire exercises. Explosions during combat simulations trigger memories of the ambush. Sleep deprivation makes the nightmares even more intense. At times he questions whether he truly belongs there or whether he is simply chasing a ghost. One powerful aspect of the story is how Ranger training mirrors his emotional struggle. The instructors repeatedly teach recruits that Rangers survive by relying on discipline, teamwork, and mental resilience. These lessons slowly help him rebuild himself psychologically. For the first time since Afghanistan, he begins reconnecting with other soldiers and learning how to trust people again. The film also shows that honoring someone's memory does not mean living entirely in grief. Through the friendships and hardships of Ranger training, he gradually understands that his brother would not have wanted him consumed by guilt forever. Carrying the memory forward means becoming stronger, not destroying himself emotionally. By the time the later events of the story unfold, including the terrifying encounter with the otherworldly killing machine, the audience fully understands why the hero refuses to give up even in impossible situations. He has already survived devastating emotional pain long before facing physical monsters. Losing his brother shaped every part of the man he became. The opening tragedy therefore serves as the emotional engine of the entire film. It explains his determination, his trauma, his leadership, and his willingness to sacrifice himself for others later in the story. His journey is not just about fighting external enemies. It is about overcoming grief, guilt, fear, and psychological scars left behind by war. In the end, the death of his brother becomes both the darkest moment of his life and the event that gives his life new direction. The battlefield ambush destroys the person he once was, but it also creates the path that transforms him into a warrior capable of facing horrors beyond imagination. After the devastating loss of his brother in Afghanistan, the surviving soldier enters Army Ranger training carrying enormous emotional scars. He no longer joins the military for glory, patriotism, or adventure. Everything inside him is fueled by grief, guilt, and the desperate need to honor the dream his brother never had the chance to complete. The film uses this next stage of the story to completely transform its tone. What begins as a realistic military survival drama slowly evolves into something darker, stranger, and terrifyingly unpredictable. The moment he arrives at Ranger selection, the audience immediately sees how brutal and dehumanizing the process is designed to be. The instructors make it clear from the beginning that individuality means nothing here. Personal identity is stripped away almost instantly because the goal of the program is to rebuild recruits into hardened soldiers capable of surviving extreme combat situations. Instead of using names, the candidates are assigned numbers. The hero becomes 81. This detail becomes one of the most important symbolic elements in the film because it reflects how Ranger training destroys the recruits' previous identities. Their personal histories, emotions, fears, and even names are treated as weaknesses. The instructors do not care who they were before arriving. They only care whether they can survive the punishment ahead. Almost none of the other recruits are referred to by real names either. They are identified by numbers, ranks, or short commands shouted across obstacle courses and training grounds. This creates a cold and impersonal atmosphere throughout the first act. The recruits stop feeling like ordinary human beings and begin resembling weapons being forged through suffering. For 81, this environment feels strangely familiar. After Afghanistan, he already feels disconnected from the person he once was. Losing his brother destroyed his emotional stability so deeply that part of him almost welcomes the harshness of Ranger training. Pain, exhaustion, and discipline become distractions from grief. Every brutal exercise gives him something concrete to focus on instead of traumatic memories. The training sequences are portrayed with intense realism and physical brutality. The recruits are constantly pushed beyond normal human limits. Sleep deprivation becomes routine. They are awakened before sunrise, forced to sprint for miles carrying heavy equipment, and subjected to endless psychological pressure from instructors who insult, humiliate, and provoke them constantly. One of the first major training exercises involves hill sprints across steep muddy terrain. The instructors force the recruits to race uphill repeatedly while carrying massive packs on their backs. Most of the soldiers struggle to keep pace. Some collapse from exhaustion. Others vomit or stumble through the mud barely able to breathe. But 81 separates himself from the others immediately. While most recruits jog painfully uphill, he sprints. The film emphasizes this repeatedly to show both his physical determination and his emotional state. It is not simply that he wants to outperform everyone else. Deep down, he is trying to punish himself. Every painful sprint feels like repayment for surviving when his brother did not. His grief pushes him to dangerous extremes. The instructors notice this almost immediately. Although they rarely show respect openly, they recognize that 81 possesses unusual mental toughness. Even when his body begins breaking down physically, he refuses to slow down. Cuts, bruises, and exhaustion mean nothing to him anymore because compared to the emotional pain he already carries, physical suffering feels manageable. The hand-to-hand combat sequences further establish his transformation. The recruits are forced into brutal close-quarters fighting exercises designed to simulate real battlefield violence. There are no flashy cinematic martial arts moments here. The fights are raw, ugly, and exhausting. Soldiers slam each other into the dirt, choke one another, and fight through pure instinct and aggression. 81 dominates these exercises. Part of this comes from his combat experience in Afghanistan, but another part comes from the rage buried inside him. Every fight becomes an emotional release for the trauma he keeps suppressing. Yet despite his effectiveness, the film carefully shows that 81 is emotionally unstable beneath the surface. During quiet moments between drills, he isolates himself from the other recruits. While others bond through shared suffering, he remains distant and emotionally closed off. Nightmares continue haunting him. Sometimes he wakes suddenly in panic after reliving his brother's death in dreams. The audience realizes he is surviving training physically while mentally fighting an entirely different battle inside his own head. One of the most memorable scenes in the training section involves the swimming pool endurance test. The recruits are ordered into a deep pool during nighttime training. The instructors explain that true Rangers must remain calm under extreme pressure, even when their bodies are screaming for survival. The recruits are forced to perform underwater drills while carrying gear and holding their breath for extended periods. Many recruits panic underwater. Some surface early gasping for air. Others struggle with claustrophobia and fear. 81 takes the challenge further than anyone else. At one point, he deliberately holds himself at the bottom of the pool long after the exercise should have ended. The instructors watch carefully as the seconds pass. Other recruits begin staring nervously, wondering if he has lost consciousness. But he remains completely still beneath the water, refusing to surface. The scene becomes deeply symbolic. Underwater silence isolates him from the world above, almost resembling death itself. For a brief moment, it feels like he is testing whether he even cares about survival anymore. The trauma of losing his brother has left him emotionally numb, and staying underwater becomes less about endurance and more about proving he can suppress fear completely. Eventually he rises calmly to the surface while the others stare in shock. The instructors say nothing, but their expressions reveal growing concern mixed with respect. They see a recruit capable of extraordinary endurance, yet they also recognize dangerous emotional instability beneath that strength. As the first act continues, the film largely follows familiar military boot camp structure. The recruits endure obstacle courses, combat drills, survival exercises, navigation tests, and psychological conditioning. These sequences create the feeling that the story is grounded in realistic military drama. However, subtle hints begin suggesting something much stranger is happening in the background. Throughout the training sequences, televisions and radios occasionally broadcast news reports about a mysterious object approaching Earth from deep space. Scientists describe it as an unusual asteroid or space rock moving unpredictably near Earth's orbit. Government officials claim there is no danger, but the tone of the broadcasts feels uneasy. At first, these moments seem unimportant. The recruits barely pay attention because they are consumed by training exhaustion. In fact, the film intentionally treats these broadcasts almost like background noise. News anchors mention strange energy readings, unexpected trajectory changes, and growing international concern, but the story never focuses on these details directly. This becomes a classic example of hidden foreshadowing. The audience slowly realizes these broadcasts are quietly building towards something massive later in the film. The mysterious object in space hangs over the story like a distant warning nobody fully understands yet. Even though the training sequences dominate the first act, the looming presence of the unidentified asteroid creates subtle tension beneath everything. Eventually, the recruits enter the final phase of Ranger training, an extended wilderness combat exercise designed to simulate real battlefield conditions. This stage pushes the soldiers beyond exhaustion. The teams are dropped into remote forest terrain with minimal supplies and limited communication. The exercise is supposed to test navigation, survival skills, teamwork, and combat readiness under extreme stress. Blank rounds are issued instead of live ammunition because the mission is only a training simulation. At first, the exercise feels normal compared to everything else they endured during Ranger School. The recruits move carefully through forests, establish camps, perform patrols, and conduct mock combat scenarios against instructors posing as enemy forces. But then the atmosphere suddenly changes. One night, while the team moves through dense wilderness under heavy cloud cover, a strange blast erupts across the sky. The moment is terrifying because it comes completely without warning. A blinding flash lights up the entire forest like daylight for several seconds. A thunderous shockwave rolls through the mountains immediately afterward, shaking trees and knocking soldiers to the ground. The noise sounds unlike anything they have ever heard before, not an explosion, not thunder, but something unnatural and enormous. Then all communications die instantly. Radios fill with static. GPS systems shut down. Electronic equipment stops functioning entirely. The recruits initially assume it may have been some kind of classified military test or satellite explosion. The instructors are unreachable, leaving the teams isolated deep in the wilderness with no understanding of what happened. Fear and confusion spread quickly through the group. As they continue moving through the forest searching for answers, they discover something strange near a creek running through the valley. Half submerged in the mud lies a bizarre metallic object unlike any aircraft or military equipment they recognize. The object appears damaged from crashing, but its surface looks unnaturally smooth and almost alive. Strange patterns pulse faintly across its metal exterior. Some recruits believe it could be an advanced classified drone or experimental aircraft belonging to the military. Others feel deeply unsettled by its appearance. Point 81 studies the object carefully and immediately senses something is wrong. The atmosphere around it feels unnatural. The air itself seems charged with static energy. Nearby electronics malfunction whenever they get close. Believing it could be dangerous enemy technology, the team decides to destroy it before moving on. Using explosives from their training gear, they rig the object for detonation and retreat to a safe distance. The explosion tears through the forest violently, sending dirt, fire, and debris into the air. But as the smoke clears, they realize the object remains completely undamaged. Not even a scratch marks its surface. The recruits stare in disbelief, unable to comprehend what they are seeing. Before anyone can react further, the object suddenly begins moving. Panels shift mechanically across its surface. Metallic limbs unfold outward with horrifying precision. The smooth structure rises slowly from the ground, transforming into a towering walking machine. The transformation scene marks the exact moment the film changes genres completely. What began as a grounded military survival drama suddenly becomes science fiction horror. The machine stands enormous and terrifying before the soldiers. Its glowing mechanical eyes scan the environment with cold intelligence. Strange alien sounds echo from inside its armored body while energy pulses beneath its metallic surface. Then it attacks. The killing begins instantly and brutally. One recruit is torn apart before anyone fully understands what is happening. Another is crushed against a tree by mechanical limbs moving faster than should be possible for something so massive. Panic erupts throughout the team. The soldiers try firing their weapons, only to remember in horror that they are carrying blank rounds because the exercise was never meant to involve real combat. Their rifles produce harmless flashes and noise while the machine continues slaughtering them effortlessly. This detail becomes especially terrifying because it strips the soldiers of the one thing they trusted most, their ability to fight back. All their ranger training suddenly feels meaningless against an enemy they cannot hurt. The machine moves relentlessly through the forest like an unstoppable predator. Bullets would likely have been ineffective anyway, but the realization that they are essentially defenseless creates overwhelming terror among the recruits. 81 immediately shifts into survival mode. Drawing on his combat instincts, he begins organizing the surviving recruits while chaos erupts around them. Even though fear surrounds everyone, his ranger training finally reveals its true purpose. The physical punishment, endurance drills, and psychological conditioning prepared him not just for combat, but for functioning under impossible stress. The film cleverly contrasts the earlier boot camp sequences with this moment. Every painful lesson from training suddenly becomes relevant. The hill sprints built endurance for escaping through rough terrain. Hand-to-hand combat taught aggression under pressure. Underwater endurance exercises taught mental control during panic. Everything that once seemed like brutal military suffering now becomes essential for survival against the impossible machine hunting them through the wilderness. Meanwhile, the mysterious space rock mentioned in earlier broadcasts finally gains terrifying new meaning. The audience realizes the object approaching Earth was never an asteroid at all. It was connected to this machine. The broadcasts were subtle warnings of an extraterrestrial threat entering Earth's orbit long before the soldiers encountered it in the forest. The earlier news reports functioned like a hidden ticking time bomb quietly building toward disaster. By the end of the first act, the story fully transforms into a nightmare survival battle between exhausted ranger recruits and an unstoppable alien killing machine. The recruits are isolated, outmatched, and nearly defenseless. Their training exercise has become real warfare against something beyond human understanding. And at the center of it all stands 81, a soldier already haunted by trauma, now forced to confront an enemy unlike anything humanity has ever faced. After the horrifying transformation of the mysterious object into a giant alien killing machine, the training exercise collapses completely into chaos. What was supposed to be the final stage of Army Ranger selection suddenly becomes a nightmare survival mission against an enemy no human being was ever prepared to face. The wilderness that once felt like a controlled military training ground now becomes a massive hunting field where exhausted recruits are stalked one by one. The initial attack by the machine is brutal and devastating. The recruits are caught entirely off guard, armed only with blank rounds meant for simulated combat exercises. Panic spreads instantly as soldiers realize their weapons are useless. Some recruits freeze in terror while others attempt desperate resistance, but the machine tears through them with terrifying efficiency. The film portrays the massacre with relentless intensity. Trees explode apart under powerful energy blasts. Soldiers are thrown through the air by the force of impacts. The giant machine moves unnaturally fast despite its enormous size, making escape feel almost impossible. Every movement of the creature feels calculated and precise, like a weapon built specifically for extermination. During the chaos, 81 immediately tries organizing the surviving recruits. His ranger instincts and battlefield experience take control even while fear threatens to overwhelm everyone around him. Unlike many of the others, he understands that panic will only lead to faster deaths. He begins shouting commands, directing soldiers toward cover and trying to establish some kind of coordinated retreat through the forest. But survival comes at a terrible cost. One of the most painful moments during the escape involves Seven, who has become 81's second in command during training. Throughout the earlier parts of Ranger School, Seven proved himself dependable, disciplined, and mentally strong. He and 81 developed mutual respect through the brutal training process, even though neither openly expressed friendship in the emotionally cold environment of Ranger selection. During the machine's attack, however, Seven suffers a catastrophic leg injury. An energy blast tears through the forest beside him, sending burning debris and shattered wood in every direction. Part of the explosion strikes his leg with horrifying force, leaving it severely mangled. The injury is portrayed realistically and painfully. Bone fractures, heavy bleeding, and torn muscle make it immediately obvious that he can no longer walk on his own. The injury changes the group dynamic completely. Until this moment, survival depended mostly on speed and mobility. Now the team must make a terrible decision. Carrying 7 will slow everyone down dramatically, increasing the chances that the machine catches them. Some recruits quietly realize that abandoning him would improve the group's survival odds. But 81 refuses to leave him behind. This decision becomes one of the defining moments of his character. Earlier in his life, he lost his own brother during combat and was forced to carry his body through the Afghan desert. That trauma still haunts him deeply. The idea of abandoning another wounded teammate feels emotionally impossible for him. The film subtly connects these moments together. Carrying 7 through the wilderness mirrors the emotional burden he carried after losing his brother. The difference now is that 7 is still alive, and 81 becomes determined not to fail another brother in arms. The surviving group is now reduced to only 6 soldiers. 81, 7, 15, 44, 109, and 23. This small number immediately emphasizes how devastating the machine's attack truly was. An entire Ranger training operation has been nearly wiped out within minutes. The survivors are exhausted, traumatized, and almost completely isolated from the outside world. Each surviving soldier reacts differently to the situation. 15 is aggressive and impulsive, wanting to fight the machine directly despite the obvious danger. 44 struggles with fear and shock after witnessing the massacre firsthand. 109 tries to maintain logical thinking, constantly analyzing their surroundings and searching for escape routes. 23 becomes increasingly paranoid, convinced the government knew about the threat before the exercise began. Meanwhile, 7 fights through unbearable pain while trying not to become a burden on the others. Despite his injuries, he continues giving tactical advice and helping 81 maintain leadership over the fractured group. The machine itself becomes even more terrifying as the survivors begin learning about its strange effects on the environment. At first, the recruits notice their compasses behaving erratically. Needles spin wildly without direction whenever the machine draws near. Initially they assume the equipment was damaged during the attack, but eventually they realize the phenomenon is directly connected to the creature. The machine somehow disrupts magnetism around it. This detail becomes extremely important because it gives the soldiers one of their only warning systems. Whenever the compass needles begin shaking violently, they know the machine is nearby. The effect creates constant tension throughout the story because even simple navigation tools become signs of approaching death. The film uses this idea brilliantly to build suspense. Several scenes show soldiers nervously staring at trembling compass needles while silence fills the forest. Long before the machine actually appears, the audience already knows danger is coming because the compasses begin malfunctioning first. It almost feels supernatural despite the science fiction explanation. The survivors eventually escape the immediate attack zone by moving downriver through dense forest terrain. The river becomes both a temporary escape route and a symbol of uncertainty. Cold water, slippery rocks, and powerful currents make travel dangerous, especially while carrying the wounded 7. The journey downriver is exhausting and emotionally draining. The soldiers are sleep-deprived, starving, and mentally shattered after witnessing their teammates slaughtered. Every sound in the forest makes them panic. At times they believe the machine is stalking them silently through the trees nearby. One of the strongest elements in this section of the story is how the film portrays psychological deterioration under extreme stress. These recruits entered Ranger training believing themselves among the toughest soldiers alive. But now they are hunted like prey by something beyond human understanding. Fear slowly strips away confidence and discipline. Arguments break out constantly over what direction to take, whether to abandon 7, and whether survival is even possible anymore. Despite this, 81 continues holding the group together. His leadership evolves naturally during these scenes. Earlier in training, he pushed himself through pain mostly out of personal guilt and emotional trauma. Now, however, responsibility for the others begins changing him. Protecting the surviving soldiers gives him a new purpose beyond simply honoring his brother's memory. Eventually, after hours of exhausting movement through the wilderness, the group reaches what they believe should be a safe zone. Their training exercise originally included cadre members posing as enemy forces during the simulation. These instructors were heavily armed professionals responsible for testing the recruits in combat scenarios. The survivors assume reaching them means finally finding real weapons, communication systems, and organized resistance against the machine. For the first time since the attack, hope begins returning. But the moment they arrive, they discover something horrifying. The cadre are already dead. The scene is deeply unsettling because these were experienced military professionals, far more prepared for combat than the trainees. Yet the machine slaughtered them effortlessly. Bodies lie scattered throughout the camp alongside destroyed vehicles and burned equipment. Signs of violent struggle cover the area. The discovery destroys any remaining illusion that trained soldiers can simply overpower the creature through normal combat tactics. If elite military instructors armed with live ammunition could not stop it, then the situation is far worse than anyone imagined. The survivors search the ruined camp desperately for clues and supplies. During this process, they begin noticing strange environmental damage extending far beyond the immediate attack area. High above the valley, massive impact scars stretch across the mountainside. Entire sections of forest appear flattened or burned away. Trees have been snapped apart in unnatural patterns as though something enormous crashed directly through the mountain itself. By tracing the destruction from the mountaintop down toward the valley, the soldiers begin forming a terrifying conclusion. The machine did not originate on Earth. It came from the sky. This realization completely changes the psychological tone of the film. Up until now, part of the group still hoped the machine might be some classified military project or experimental weapon gone wrong. But the impact trail proves something far more disturbing. The creature arrived from space, likely connected to the mysterious object previously reported in Earth's orbit. The recruits finally understand they are dealing with extraterrestrial technology. The film carefully explores the emotional impact of this realization. For trained soldiers accustomed to understanding enemies through strategy and intelligence reports, the idea of facing alien machinery feels psychologically overwhelming. Traditional military thinking suddenly becomes useless because the rules of warfare no longer apply. The machine is not motivated by politics, ideology, or territory. It exists purely to destroy. The survivors decide their only hope is reaching the main base before the machine kills them all. Inside the destroyed cadre camp, they discover an APC, an armored personnel carrier, still functional despite the massacre. The APC represents temporary hope and safety. For the first time since the attack, the soldiers possess armored transportation capable of moving quickly through dangerous terrain. They load the wounded 7 inside while gathering every useful supply they can find. Most importantly, they finally acquire live ammunition. This moment feels emotionally significant because earlier they were helpless with blank rounds during the initial massacre. Now they finally have real weapons capable of fighting back. The soldiers immediately begin preparing for confrontation. Machine guns are mounted. Ammunition belts are loaded. Grenades and explosives are distributed among the team. The atmosphere shifts from helpless terror to desperate determination. Even though fear remains overwhelming, the soldiers regain some confidence simply by having functional weapons again. But this hope does not last long. As the APC moves through rough terrain toward the base, the machine returns. The chase sequence becomes one of the most intense parts of the film. The giant alien machine bursts through forests and rocky terrain behind the vehicle, pursuing them relentlessly. Its movements feel terrifyingly efficient, almost insect-like despite its massive mechanical body. The soldiers open fire immediately with live ammunition. Heavy machine guns unleash continuous streams of bullets into the creature. Grenades explode around it. The APC's mounted weapons hammer against the machine's armor with deafening force. For a few moments, the soldiers believe they may actually have a chance. Then they realize the horrifying truth. The machine's armor is completely impenetrable. Bullets ricochet harmlessly off its metallic surface without leaving visible damage. Explosions barely slow it down. Even concentrated gunfire from military-grade weapons proves useless. The scene crushes the last remnants of hope among the group. The soldiers stare in disbelief as their strongest weapons fail completely. Everything they trusted as rangers, firepower, combat skill, military training, suddenly means nothing against this enemy. The machine continues advancing relentlessly through explosions and gunfire like an unstoppable force of nature. This realization changes the story from survival action into existential horror. The recruits are no longer simply trying to defeat an enemy. They are trying to survive something fundamentally beyond human capability. The machine represents technological superiority so overwhelming that human warfare becomes irrelevant against it. Inside the APC, tension erupts among the survivors. 15 argues they should continue fighting aggressively despite the odds. 23 begins losing psychological control entirely, convinced humanity is already doomed if more machines like this exist. 44 struggles with panic while trying desperately to reload ammunition belts fast enough to slow the creature's advance. Meanwhile, 7, despite his severe injury, remains one of the few voices maintaining calm logic. Even while bleeding heavily, he helps 81 analyze the machine's behavior and search for possible weaknesses. 81 himself undergoes major emotional transformation during these scenes. Earlier in the film, his motivation came mainly from grief and self-punishment. But now leadership responsibility fully defines him. He realizes survival depends not on reckless heroics, but on keeping the team united under impossible conditions. The film brilliantly contrasts the recruits' earlier Ranger training with their current nightmare situation. The training was designed to prepare soldiers for the harshest combat conditions imaginable. Yet even that preparation falls short against an extraterrestrial killing machine immune to human weapons. Still, the psychological lessons of Ranger training remain important. Discipline, endurance, adaptability, and teamwork become the only things preventing complete collapse among the survivors. While weapons fail, human resilience continues fighting. As the machine relentlessly pursues the APC across forests and mountain roads, the surviving recruits finally understand the true scale of the nightmare surrounding them. They are isolated deep in the wilderness. Communications remain destroyed. Military support is unreachable. And somewhere beyond Earth's atmosphere may exist forces capable of sending more machines like this one. The realization transforms their struggle from a simple survival mission into humanity's first desperate encounter with an enemy unlike anything the world has ever seen. As the terrifying chase through the mountains continues, the remaining Ranger trainees realize they are running out of options. Their APC tears across rough terrain while the alien machine relentlessly pursues them through forests, valleys, and steep mountain roads. The soldiers inside are physically exhausted, emotionally shattered, and nearly out of ammunition. Earlier, they still believed military weapons and armored vehicles might somehow slow the creature down, but after witnessing bullets and explosives bounce harmlessly off its armor, hope has almost completely disappeared. The atmosphere inside the APC becomes suffocating with fear and desperation. Every impact from the machine's attacks shakes the vehicle violently. Sparks burst from damaged electronics while the engine struggles to maintain speed across the rocky terrain. The wounded 7 grows weaker from blood loss, but he continues trying to help the others stay focused. Meanwhile, the surviving soldiers argue constantly over what to do next because none of them truly believe escape is possible anymore. 81 remains the only person still thinking clearly. The years of emotional pain caused by his brother's death, combined with the brutal conditioning of Ranger training, have transformed him into someone capable of functioning even under unimaginable pressure. Deep inside, fear still exists, but he has learned to suppress it enough to keep moving forward. While the others panic or lose hope, he studies the environment constantly, searching for anything they can use against the machine. The machine itself continues advancing behind them like an unstoppable predator. It crashes through trees effortlessly, climbs impossible terrain, and fires devastating energy blasts that tear apart the landscape. The creature does not move recklessly. Every action feels calculated and intelligent, as though it is studying human behavior while hunting them. One detail especially terrifies the surviving recruits: the machine never appears tired. The soldiers are starving, wounded, dehydrated, and emotionally broken after days of non-stop survival. Yet the alien machine pursues them with the same relentless efficiency it displayed during the initial attack. It feels less like fighting a living enemy and more like trying to escape death itself. As the chase intensifies, 81 notices the unstable mountain terrain surrounding the road ahead. Jagged cliffs rise above the narrow passage where the APC struggles forward. Massive boulders and loose rock formations cover the mountainside. A dangerous idea forms in his mind. Since conventional weapons cannot damage the machine directly, perhaps the environment itself can slow it down. He orders the driver toward a narrow section of the mountain pass while preparing explosives salvaged from earlier military supplies. The surviving soldiers barely understand his plan, but they trust him because he is the only reason any of them are still alive. The sequence that follows becomes one of the film's most intense action scenes. As the machine closes in behind the APC, 81 leaps from the moving vehicle onto unstable rocky terrain above the road. Gunfire and energy blasts erupt around him while the others continue driving below. The scene mirrors the reckless bravery once displayed by his brother in Afghanistan, symbolizing how 81 has finally grown into the kind of leader his brother always believed he could become. Ignoring the danger, he races across the mountainside planting explosives among loose rock formations. Every second feels critical because the machine continues advancing rapidly toward the trapped APC below. The tension becomes unbearable. If the explosives fail, everyone dies. At the last possible moment, 81 detonates the charges. The entire mountainside collapses in a massive rockslide. Gigantic boulders crash downward with enormous force, burying the machine beneath tons of rock and debris. Dust and destruction explode across the valley as the avalanche tears through the landscape. For the first time in the film, the machine is actually stopped, or at least temporarily subdued. But the victory comes at a terrible price. The collapsing terrain also destroys the APC. The armored vehicle is crushed and overturned by the chaos of the landslide. The impact kills most of the remaining team instantly. The few who survive the initial crash are caught by falling debris or killed when the machine begins struggling beneath the rocks. The sequence feels tragic because these soldiers survived impossible horrors only to die moments before reaching safety. When the dust finally settles, only 2 people remain alive. 81 and 7. The realization hits with devastating emotional weight. Every other recruit who endured Ranger training alongside them is now dead. The entire mission has become a graveyard. The brotherhood formed through suffering and survival has been reduced to only 2 broken soldiers stranded deep in the wilderness. 81 drags the wounded 7 away from the destroyed APC while the buried machine struggles beneath the rockslide behind them. Even injured and exhausted, 81 refuses to abandon him. The memory of carrying his dead brother through Afghanistan still drives every decision he makes. Saving 7 becomes symbolic of saving the brother he once lost. For a brief moment, silence fills the mountains. Then something deeply unsettling happens. The buried machine suddenly emits a strange pulse of light through the rubble. Metallic sounds echo beneath the rocks as glowing energy begins radiating upward into the night sky. A massive beam-like signal shoots high above the mountains, disappearing into the clouds and toward space itself. 81 watches in horror. He immediately realizes the machine is communicating with something beyond Earth. This moment completely changes the scale of the story. Until now, the alien machine felt like a singular nightmare isolated within the forest. But the signal confirms something far more terrifying. The creature is not alone. The machine was sending a message, possibly calling for reinforcements. The implications are horrifying because the survivors already struggled against a single machine. The idea that more could arrive transforms their survival mission into the beginning of a global catastrophe. Knowing the machine will eventually free itself from the rockslide, 81 carries 7 deeper into the forest searching for temporary shelter. The wilderness now feels eerily silent after the destruction. Fires burn across parts of the mountainside while smoke drifts through the trees. Everywhere around them are signs of death and devastation. This quieter section of the film becomes deeply emotional because it finally allows the characters to process everything they endured. 7's condition worsens rapidly. His leg injury has become infected, and blood loss leaves him weak and barely conscious. Despite the pain, however, he remains mentally sharp enough to speak honestly with 81 for the first time. Until now, their relationship mostly revolved around military discipline. 7 reveals that he knew 81's brother personally. The revelation shocks 81 because his brother rarely spoke about his military relationships back home. 7 explains that they served together briefly before the Afghanistan ambush that killed him. He describes 81's brother as one of the bravest soldiers he ever met, someone who constantly talked about family and believed his younger brother had the potential to become an exceptional ranger someday. The conversation becomes one of the emotional heartbeats of the film. For the first time since his brother's death, 81 hears stories about him from someone who truly understood him as a soldier and friend. 7 explains that the older brother admired 81 deeply and always believed he would eventually become stronger than he realized. This changes something inside 81 emotionally. Until now, his entire journey through ranger training was driven by guilt and grief. He believed becoming a ranger was simply a way to honor his brother's unfinished dream. But hearing that his brother genuinely believed in him helps him understand something important. He was never meant to destroy himself carrying guilt forever. His brother wanted him to live. This realization gives 81 renewed mental clarity at the exact moment he needs it most. As they continue hiding in the forest, 81 begins replaying every encounter with the machine in his mind. Unlike the others, he has spent the entire ordeal observing patterns rather than simply reacting in fear. Slowly, he notices an important detail he overlooked before. The machine has a ventilation system. During several moments in combat, he noticed heat escaping from narrow openings along its armored body whenever it fired energy blasts or exerted itself heavily. At the time, the detail seemed unimportant. But now, after watching the machine survive explosions, bullets, and collapsing mountains, he realizes overwhelming force alone will never destroy it. The answer lies in its internal systems. This discovery represents the culmination of everything Ranger training taught him. Earlier exercises forced recruits to adapt creatively under impossible conditions. 81's engineering instincts, survival skills, and battlefield observation finally combine into a real strategy. He formulates a desperate final plan. Nearby, hidden within the forest, lies an abandoned construction site containing gravel, machinery, and industrial materials. If he can force debris into the machine's ventilation system, perhaps he can cause internal overheating severe enough to destroy it from the inside. The plan sounds almost impossible. But it is their only chance. Meanwhile, the buried machine finally frees itself from the rockslide and resumes hunting them. The compasses begin spinning wildly again, signaling its approach through the forest. Trees shake in the distance as the giant alien predator moves closer. 81 helps 7 hide safely near the construction area before preparing for the confrontation alone. The final battle feels incredibly tense because it is no longer about brute force. Earlier military tactics failed completely. This time, survival depends entirely on intelligence, timing, and psychological control. 81 deliberately lures the machine toward the construction site using noise and movement. The creature follows immediately, scanning the environment with glowing mechanical eyes. The giant machine towers over unfinished structures and piles of construction gravel while searching for its target. The scene visually reflects humanity fighting back not through superior technology, but through adaptability and ingenuity. As the machine attacks, 81 maneuvers carefully through the construction site while activating industrial equipment and triggering small explosions to distract it. Every second feels deadly because one direct hit would kill him instantly. Then he begins executing his real plan. Using loaders and collapsing machinery, he pours massive quantities of small rocks and gravel directly into the machine's exposed ventilation system whenever it opens during energy surges. At first, nothing happens. The machine continues attacking aggressively, seemingly unaffected. But gradually signs of malfunction begin appearing. Its movements become unstable. Strange sounds echo from inside its armored body. Heat builds rapidly beneath its metal surface as the rocks clog internal cooling systems. The machine starts overheating. The battle becomes increasingly chaotic as sparks and flames erupt from its body. The alien technology that once seemed invincible suddenly begins collapsing under its own internal heat. Realizing it is critically damaged, the machine turns its attention fully toward 81 in a final desperate attack. But it is too late. The overheating reaches catastrophic levels. With a massive explosion, the giant alien machine detonates from within. Fire tears through the construction site as pieces of burning metal scatter across the forest. Shockwaves ripple through the area while the creature that slaughtered entire military teams finally collapses into destruction. For the first time since the nightmare began, silence returns completely. 81 survives. Exhausted, wounded, and emotionally shattered, he returns to 7 after destroying the machine. Together, the two survivors slowly make their way back toward the devastated military base. The return journey feels haunting. Burned forests, destroyed vehicles, and dead soldiers line the path back to civilization. The training exercise that began as a test of endurance has transformed into evidence of humanity's first battle against an extraterrestrial invasion. When they finally reach the ruined base, surviving military personnel are already scrambling to understand the disaster unfolding worldwide. There, high-ranking officials Sheridan and Torres reveal the horrifying truth. The object previously believed to be a harmless asteroid was actually part of a massive alien force entering Earth's orbit. The machine 81 destroyed was only one member of an entire army. All across the planet, similar attacks have already begun. Cities are under assault. Military forces worldwide are struggling against alien machines with nearly impenetrable armor. Humanity is facing a full-scale invasion unlike anything in history. The revelation transforms the story from isolated survival horror into the opening chapter of a global war. Yet amid the chaos, 81 provides the military with the first real breakthrough against the machines. He explains the ventilation weakness. Although their armor is nearly indestructible externally, the machines depend on cooling systems vulnerable to obstruction and overheating. This information instantly becomes humanity's first effective tactical advantage. Military leaders finally recognize what 81 accomplished. He did not simply survive the encounter. He discovered how to kill them. Because of his courage, leadership, and critical knowledge, 81 is officially accepted into the legendary 75th Ranger Regiment, the exact dream his brother once hoped to achieve. But the moment feels bittersweet rather than triumphant. The honor comes after unimaginable loss. Nearly everyone who trained beside him is dead. His journey transformed him through trauma, sacrifice, and survival. He is no longer simply a grieving younger brother trying to honor a memory. He has become a warrior capable of leading humanity's resistance. The film ends with 81 preparing for the next assault against the alien machines. Soldiers mobilize across military bases while global panic spreads through news broadcasts. Massive fleets prepare for war as humanity braces itself against an enemy descending from the stars. And standing at the center of that coming war is 81, a man forged through grief, ranger training, and impossible survival, now carrying the responsibility of leading humanity into its darkest battle point. One of the most terrifying and memorable aspects of War Machine, 2026, is the design and presence of the alien killing machine itself. The creature is not portrayed like a traditional science fiction alien or a simple military robot. Instead, it feels like a horrifying fusion of industrial war technology and extraterrestrial intelligence, something built solely for hunting, destruction, and psychological terror. From the moment it first rises from the wreckage near the creek, the machine completely changes the tone of the film. What begins as a grounded military survival story suddenly transforms into a relentless nightmare where exhausted ranger recruits are hunted by an unstoppable mechanical predator. The machine's appearance immediately creates fear because it feels both familiar and alien at the same time. It resembles a giant bipedal war machine, towering over the soldiers like a walking tank. Its structure is bulky and heavily armored, giving it the overwhelming physical presence of a battlefield weapon rather than a living creature. Yet despite its massive size, it moves with terrifying speed and precision. Every movement feels unnatural, almost insect-like, as if advanced alien engineering has removed all limitations of weight and mechanics. The design combines brutal military functionality with disturbing extraterrestrial features. Thick armored legs slam into the earth with enough force to shake the ground, while mechanical joints rotate in impossible ways that human technology could never replicate. Glowing lights pulse beneath the armor plating like veins carrying energy through a living organism. Its metallic surface constantly shifts subtly, almost as though the machine is alive and adapting to its surroundings. Unlike sleek science fiction robots designed to look elegant or futuristic, this machine looks ugly, aggressive, and cruel. It resembles a weapon created without concern for beauty or humanity. Everything about its appearance suggests violence. Sharp mechanical limbs, enormous armored plating, glowing sensory systems, and devastating weapons all combine into something deeply intimidating. The audience immediately understands this is not an explorer, diplomat, or intelligent alien seeking communication. It is a predator. The film's decision to make the machine bipedal is especially important because it creates a disturbing sense of familiarity. It walks upright like a human soldier, but in a twisted and monstrous form. Watching it move through forests and mountains almost feels like seeing war itself come alive. The machine becomes a dark mirror of the army rangers hunting through the wilderness. Both the soldiers and the creature move tactically, stalk targets, and adapt during combat. But while the rangers rely on exhaustion, courage, and teamwork, the machine functions with cold mechanical efficiency. One of the most terrifying elements of the machine is how relentlessly it pursues the recruits. The soldiers are already physically broken from ranger training before the alien threat even appears. They are starving, sleep-deprived, emotionally exhausted, and carrying only blank rounds because the exercise was never meant to involve real combat. Against such vulnerable targets, the machine becomes almost unstoppable. It does not hesitate, retreat, or show mercy. Once it identifies the recruits as targets, it hunts them continuously across mountains, rivers, forests, and roads with horrifying persistence. This relentless pursuit creates the film's core tension. Unlike many science fiction monsters that disappear for long stretches before attacking suddenly, the machine in War Machine constantly feels present even when off-screen. The recruits can never truly relax because they know the machine is always tracking them somewhere nearby. Every spinning compass needle, every strange sound in the forest, and every sudden vibration in the ground reminds them that the creature is still hunting them. Director Hughes structures the film around a series of escalating encounters between the soldiers and the machine. Each confrontation occurs in a different environment, forcing the recruits to adapt constantly while showing new aspects of the machine's terrifying abilities. The mountainside slaughter becomes the first truly horrifying showcase of its power. After the machine initially transforms from the strange metallic object near the creek, panic erupts among the recruits. Most still believe they are facing some kind of classified military technology rather than an extraterrestrial entity. But the moment the creature attacks, all illusions disappear instantly. The mountain environment becomes a death trap. The recruits attempt to retreat uphill through rocky terrain while the machine advances below them. Gunfire echoes uselessly through the valley as blank rounds fail to damage the creature. The soldiers are forced into pure survival mode almost immediately. The machine tears through trees, smashes boulders apart, and unleashes devastating energy blasts that explode across the mountainside.